Good morning. Welcome to summer online worship with the First Unitarian Church of Worcester, Massachusetts. I'm Jay Lavelle, a member of the church and the summer worship coordinator. Our service leader this morning is Ken Mandile. Our musician is Carrick McCullough, and Connor West is our technical director. It is wonderful to have you all here watching with us this morning. Here at First Unitarian Church, we strive in loving fellowship to honor the sacred, connect with each other, and serve justice. As a welcoming congregation, we are a welcoming congregation, whatever your age, race, class, nationality, sexual orientation, or gender identity, we are delighted to have you with us this morning. We are thinking of all of you with love and affection during this difficult time when we cannot be together in person. If you can stay connected to the church through the website, firstunitarian.com, our Facebook page, and our newsletter. If you would like to receive our e-newsletter, please go to firstunitarian.com and click subscribe to our newsletter at the bottom of any page. We'd also like to announce today that at 11:30 this morning, Ken will be hosting a virtual coffee time on Zoom. If you would like to join in, use your Zoom app. The login credentials are posted in the chat conversation, but they are the meeting ID is 954-324-90713, and the password is be kind, all caps, with a hyphen between. Again, that is posted in the chat conversation on the YouTube page. This is the day the Lord has made. Let us rejoice and be glad in it. In the spirit of love, we light this chalice. Together, let us renew the covenant of this church. In the love of truth and the spirit of Jesus, we unite for the worship of God and the service of all.
Good morning. Please join me for a common prayer. The prayer is printed in the YouTube description. Grant us the ability to find joy and strength, not in the strident call to arms, but in stretching out our arms, to grasp our fellow creatures, in the striving for justice and truth. Amen. In our sacred time together, we share the joys and sorrows of our church with one another. This morning, Paul asked that we remember the words of Terry Tempest Williams as we contemplate and accept our responsibilities to future generations to reduce the effects of climate change in the world. The eyes of the future are looking back at us, and they are praying for us to see beyond our own time. Also, please hold my wife Diane and her brothers and sisters in your thoughts as they mourn the death of their mother Julie. Julie died at home this week after a short period of hospice care. She was able to be visited by many family members in her last days. Along with Diane's father, Julie's sister, and many grandchildren, we mourn her loss, but we know that she has found peace. Please continue with your own thoughts and prayers in silence. In our time of prayer and meditation, we reach out to one another in compassion as we say together the prayer of Jesus. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever. First Unitarian Church relies on your financial support to maintain our diverse ministries and programs. If you'd like to support all we do as a church, text 844-906-2338, followed by the amount you wish to donate to First Unitarian Church. You can also go to firstunitarian.com and click Give Online at the top of the page. I invite your generous contributions for the good work of the church. Our reading this morning is from Luke. But to you who are listening, I say, love your enemies. Do good to those who hate you. Bless those who curse you. Pray for those who mistreat you. If someone slaps you on one cheek, turn to them the other also. If someone takes your coat, do not withhold your shirt from them. Give to everyone who asks of you, and if anyone takes what belongs to you, do not demand it back. Do to others as you would have them do to you. If you love those who love you, what credit is that to you? Even sinners love those who love them. And if you do good to those who are good to you, what credit is that to you? Even sinners do that. And if you lend to those from whom you expect repayment, what credit is that to you? Even sinners lend to sinners, expecting to be repaid in full. But love your enemies, do good to them, and lend to them without expecting to get anything back. Then your reward will be great, and you will be children of the Most High, because he is kind to the ungrateful and wicked. Good morning. I appreciate you joining me this morning. I've been reading a lot over the past few years about intermittent fasting. And this is basically an eating schedule where you block out a large segment of every day or even a whole day to fast. It's supposed to have a variety of health benefits, from weight loss, boosting the immune system, spurring cell regeneration, and extending longevity. And it sounded intriguing to me. So in late January, I began sticking to a rigid fasting schedule between 8 p.m. and noon the following day. This is a 16-hour fast followed by an 8-hour window where I'm allowed to eat. It sounds hard, and it wasn't at first, but around 11 a.m. every day, I'd start to feel hunger pangs, but I'd struggle through with some black coffee. Often, by the time noon arrived, I wasn't hungry anymore, and I'd be able to delay lunch until 1. After about a month, I was feeling pretty proud of myself for sticking to the fasting schedule. In late February, Diane and I went on a 10-day trip to Cuba, where every morning our host at the Casa Particulares, the Cuban equivalent of a guest house or a bed and breakfast, would start by spreading out a huge breakfast feast in front of us. I'd wave off every offer of food, as I was sticking to my fasting schedule, and I'd ask for black coffee only, while everyone else in our tour group was happy to share with me how delicious the food was. It was about then that I realized that this wasn't only about a healthy eating schedule anymore. The restraint of avoiding the feast in front of me and bearing through the hunger pangs that would follow made me realize that I had the willpower to suffer some regular discomfort and survive for a few hours. I came to appreciate what millions of people who fast for religious observances go through. I'll come back to spiritual discipline later, but first we need to suffer through some uncomfortable realities. In the end, I'm hoping that you'll find your own way to practice kindness as a spiritual discipline, but in the interest of full disclosure, I want to admit up front that this is not a practice that I've mastered. To make kindness a spiritual practice, you have to commit to it with intent. And I don't think you'll fall into it accidentally as I did with intermittent fasting. Perhaps the biggest challenge is that you need to see humanity as inherently good, deserving of kindness, despite the image you've been sold. Kindness is a catch-all word that includes sentiments such as sympathy, generosity, benevolence, and compassion. It's relatively easy to offer acts of kindness to your friends and family, or even to people whose path you cross as you go through your day. I want you to consider giving humanity as a whole some kindness and compassion, because despite what we've been taught, kindness is a default virtue of humans. Immersed in the horrors that we see on the news all day, every day, it's understandable that you've been given the impression that anger, cruelty, and violence are the norm for humanity. Mass murder of school children, terrorism, religious and nationalistic extremism, greed, hatred spewed at refugees, misogyny, homophobia, vanity, hypocrisy, the list goes on. It sounds like we're a deeply flawed species. If we're not flawed bad enough as individuals, then we're definitely flawed as a society. It seems like we're degenerating. Evolution is somehow returning us to our animalistic roots. Humanity doesn't seem to want or deserve our kindness, or so this is what we've been fooled into believing. Western society has been built on the idea that humans are inherently bad and shouldn't be trusted. Our religions, form of government, and legal code are based on the principle that we are flawed and that we need to be controlled. Western society has been heavily influenced by the Christian doctrine of original sin, which taught that because of the sins of Adam, we're all born flawed and can only be redeemed by the grace of God. St. Augustine's writing on original sin have permeated multiple facets of Western societies throughout the last 1600 years. It was and is so pervasive that our secular society today continues to believe that humans are innately flawed. With few exceptions, philosophers from the past few hundred centuries have bought into the innate evil of humans. Thomas Hobbes, the influential 17th century political philosopher, said that if we were left to our own devices, as if in a state of nature, the human condition would consist of no account of time, no arts, no letters, no society, and, which is worst of all, continual fear and danger of violent death, and the life of man solitary, poor, nasty, brutish, and short. Hobbes said that we humans were selfish beasts and that human existence was a war of all against all. For Unitarian Universalists, original sin holds no credence. We temper our spiritual beliefs with reason. Our principle that values the worth and dignity of every person bestows on people an original blessing deserving of grace. Early Universalists and Unitarians, in fact, separated themselves from other Christians in part because they rejected original sin. Our dilemma is that we're still living in a society that has been influenced by this doctrine for centuries, and it is ingrained in our culture. Many of our modern social structures, including our form of government, were designed to mitigate against the natural brutishness of humankind. The corruption of the human soul was a very influential concept to our country's founders. It continues today. Take a look at the size of our domestic police forces and our prison population. Consider the popularity of self-help books and programs which have become a multi-billion dollar market over the past 50 years. This market is dedicated to fixing all that is wrong with us. Keeping nasty, brutish, selfish beasts under control is big business. So we can see that our low opinion of humankind predates modern media, but we no longer need priests and ministers to teach us how sinful humankind is. We can see it on television, in the newspaper, and online. The media business needs eyeballs to make money, and our eyeballs are addicted to bad news. The particularly brutish wars of the 20th century sparked a serious scientific inquiry into the evil nature of humans. After World War II, there was a rush to figure out how people could have allowed and participated in the horrors of the Holocaust. Hundreds of social psychology researchers turned their attention to evil. Not surprisingly, they almost always confirmed what most people already believed. Humans are evil and are easily turned into savages. If the veneer of society is scratched deep enough, we'll all be living like Ralph and Jack and Piggy in Lord of the Flies. This hardly sounds like a species that I'm going to sell kindness to, or one that even deserves kindness, but give me a few more minutes. More recent researchers have better theories about human nature. In his book, Blueprint, The Evolutionary Origins of a Good Society, Nicholas Christakis puts forth an evolutionary theory that humans are hardwired to be good, to cooperate, to be kind, to teach each other, to protect each other. Our genes and our environment protect what is called a phenotype. Basically, they give us the design of our observable characteristics. Phenotypes include things like height, eye color, hair color, etc. Living creatures also have extended phenotypes. These are behaviors that are not part of the observable physical characteristics. For instance, spiders know how to make webs without another spider teaching them, just as birds can build nests and beavers can build dams. Christakis offers his theory that we are also hardwired with an extended phenotype that includes a social suite of 8 behaviors that give us the inherent tools to create a good society. Among the 8 characteristics of our social suite are things like love for partners and offspring, friendship, social networks, and cooperation. He makes a compelling case that we have no choice but to continue to work toward a good society. It's in our genes. This doesn't mean that we don't have violence and wars and arguments with our spouses, but on a macro scale, we love those around us and we want to cooperate with them. Christakis concludes his book with a rephrasing of a Martin Luther King Jr. quote by saying, "The arc of our evolutionary history is long, but it bends toward goodness." In a book published last month called Humankind, A Hopeful History, Dutch popular historian and author Rutger Bregman builds on Christakis' blueprint with dozens of examples of how we've been given a false picture of the nature of humankind. Bregman spends a lot of time debunking some of the major social psychology studies done since World War II. He rips apart some of these studies, including the famous Stanford prison experiment, where volunteers were assigned as prisoners or prison guards. The experiment had to be stopped early because of the sadistic behavior of the pretend prison guards. The frightening results of the experiment have been the topic of many newspaper, magazine, and television stories, as well as being taught in psychology and sociology classes in our colleges and high schools. It became part of popular culture and accepted as proof of the innate savagery of people. More recent researchers, including Rutger Bregman, have gone back to take a closer look at how the experiment was performed. And what they found is that the guards didn't just turn into sadistic madmen on their own. They were coached, and they behaved exactly how they believed the researchers wanted them to behave. Some, in fact, tried to quit early because they were not willing to participate in the sadistic behavior expected of them. The famous experiment, accepted for decades as proof of the sadistic tendency of men, in the end was a fraud. Bregman looks into other famous experiments and found similar serious flaws in how they were designed and performed, and in how the conclusions were presented. These studies were widely accepted because they confirmed what we already knew. People are inherently bad. Even modern science and reason is haunted by the ghost of original sin. These 2 authors don't try to mask the evils of the world, but they make it clear that the default tendency of people is to be kind and good. Perhaps we can just give humankind a break, love it with its flaws while we work at being better. Recognize that humankind is always trying to move forward towards redemption, not from inherited sin, but from Adam, not from sin inherited from Adam, but from its past and current flaws. Offer it the grace that you would offer any family member or stranger struggling to be better. Recognize the inherent worth and dignity of every individual, but also of humanity as a whole. Because if you can't do that, humankind is going to live down to your expectations. Rutger Bregman says that standing up for human goodness isn't easy. He says, quote, "To stand up for human goodness is to take a stand against the powers that be. For the powerful, a hopeful view of human nature is downright threatening, subversive, seditious. It implies that we're not selfish beasts that need to be reined in, restrained, and regulated. It implies that we need a different kind of leadership." This is all very well, and I hope you found it interesting, but what can you do with this new image of humankind? That's where I challenge you to consider kindness as a spiritual practice for your own benefit. Spiritual practices are usually things that you set aside time for every day, so it's really asking a lot. You can simply learn and practice words of compassion, perform random acts of kindness, let the social media insult pass, take a hiatus from the news, read a substantial analysis of the world's problems instead. Or even better, read a love story. All of these are going to improve your life much more than carrying around the burden of resentment toward your fellow citizens. It doesn't mean becoming disengaged, though, from the important work that needs to be done. It does mean that these problems can be solved if we recognize that good is the default condition of your fellow humans. It changes our focus away from tearing down and instead to building up. Bregman offers 10 rules to live by. I'm going to share only 2 of them with you. Number 1, come out of the closet. Don't be ashamed to do good. He says that you'll be labeled a bleeding heart or a show-off or sanctimonious. The thing about kindness is that it is contagious, so others need to see you being kind. You don't have to blow your own horn to be a good role model. You cannot act in secret. Jesus told his disciples, "You are the light of the world. A city set on a hill cannot be hidden, nor do people light a lamp and put it under a basket, but on a stand, and it gives light to all in the house." Kindness is contagious. Number 2, when in doubt, assume the best. Here Bregman tells us that we have a negativity bias. A single unpleasant remark makes a deeper impression than 10 compliments combined, he says. Trust is hard because of what's known as asymmetrical feedback. If your faith in someone is misplaced, the truth will surface sooner or later. In other words, you'll get the feedback you need to learn from. On the other hand, if you decide not to trust someone, you'll never know if you're right because you'll never get the feedback. Your default position should be to give the benefit of the doubt because most people mean well. Bregman tells of a psychologist who studied con artists. Her main tip was not to always be on guard. She said that, quote, you quote, accept and account for the fact that you'll occasionally be cheated. That's a small price to pay for the luxury of a lifetime of trusting other people. If you've never been conned, then you should be asking yourself if your basic attitude is trusting enough, unquote. Spiritual practices and disciplines often include some discomfort, and responding with kindness can often be a challenge and make you uncomfortable. Perhaps the discomfort is shyness, or perhaps it's insecurity that you don't know what's needed, or perhaps it's discomfort because you need to check your ego by letting someone else have the last word. Just as I've survived that last hour of intermittent fasting, you'll survive the discomfort of being kind. Just as I have to make the intentional choice not to eat when my stomach demands, Your kindness practice requires you to live through some discomfort. They say about fasting that sometimes you have to empty yourself to be filled. The same goes for kindness. By offering it, you will be filled. But first, kindness as a spiritual practice requires you to have a fundamental belief in the goodness of humanity as a whole, as communities, and as individuals, not as fallen souls, but as children of God who sometimes fail, redeemable, deserving of grace not only from their God, but from their fellow humans. Be kind, be trusting, be compassionate, be loving, offer grace to those who need it most. Look for the wonder and the good and the kindness in all of humanity. Amen. I want to remind you that I'll be hosting a Zoom virtual coffee time at 11:30. The meeting ID and password are posted in the YouTube chat. I want to share a few more words from Rutger Bregman. It's what he closed his book with. Be realistic, be courageous, be true to your nature and offer your trust. Do good in broad daylight, and don't be afraid of your generosity. You may be dismissed as gullible and naive at first, but remember, what's naive today may be common sense tomorrow. It's time for a new realism. It's time for a new view of humankind. Go forth into the world in peace, Be of good courage. Hold fast to that which is good. Render to no one evil for evil. Strengthen the faint-hearted. Support the weak. Help the afflicted. Honor everyone. Love and serve the holy, rejoicing in the power of the Spirit forever. Amen.